I better, no, I can't turn that phone off.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience today, for joining us. My name is Brittany Wilmus. I'm an editor at National Catholic Reporter, and I'm joining you today with Franciscan Father Richard Rohr. I know you're expecting to see Michael Leach, the editor of our Soul Seeing series. We're hoping that he can join us soon, but he's having some technical issues. So thank you for your patience today as we get started. I'd like to welcome our guests, which all of you are eagerly anticipating, Father Richard Rohr, Franciscan author, contributor to NCR with a beautiful column today on Lent and the resurrection. Welcome.
It's a delight to be connected. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. So can you tell us sort of some of the inspiration behind your Lent column, which is called "Once We Were Stardust, and What We Will Be is the Good Surprise"?
You know, like so many of us, I've learned a lot from astronomers and not physical therapists. What's the word I'm looking for? Physicists, yeah, physicists, and quantum physics in particular. And they're just giving us a shape to the universe that, for me, so aligns with good theology. A universe that's as big as God is, and a God that's as big as the universe is. And that's what I'm trying to make clear in my recent books. And I guess, did Mike interview me on that? I never know which interview. Sorry, but I think that was a live interview with him, huh? Yeah, probably. Doesn't matter.
Well, there's so much to unpack in this piece, and it's an overwhelming amount. It reminds me much of what we hear on Global Sisters Report with Sister Ilia Delia, who's often writing about also the cosmic sphere. And I'm going to borrow some questions from Mike here because he spent some time with these this week with your column, and he says he's musing on the idea of incarnation as God's hiding place, as a place of epiphany in the physical world. And Mike asks, is the world also our hiding place?
Wow, very clever, as Mike always is. Yeah, at least it seems like we're on a perpetual journey of discovery. And those who are more serious about that journey of discovery, those who have curiosity, as Jesus said, always find. And they find more mystery and more mystery. And I don't mean mystery as the unknowable, but as the endlessly knowable. There's always more knowability and simultaneously more unknowability. You know that you don't know. And that idea is even being accepted by rationalists and scientists, people at one time that we considered our combatants. There's just no reason to combat anymore. Huh? It's exciting that we've moved beyond Newtonian physics, which kept everything rather static, kept God rather static, God as a thing, as a being, instead of being itself. And once we get into this dynamic universe that is still, we know, expanding outward, and not only expanding outward, but at a faster pace, it gives us a cosmic humility about our own religion. But for me, it's become a cosmic confidence that a lot that Jesus said might just be true, if I can put it that way.
Mm-hmm. And it's something that I think we're all reckoning with. This column landed for me in this year, especially where we've all spent the past year grappling with a new reality, a much reduced reality from what most of us have known in terms of being out in the world and kind of grappling with our mortality, as this pandemic has changed our lives, that this idea is really coming to roost for some people, I think.
It's so true that we had to share a global sickness to realize our global oneness in a way that we would have preferred not to learn. This has to be the Paschal Mystery, and the upcoming 3 days are a perfect opportunity to remind us that good Christianity told us this all along, that it was all a cosmic event. It wasn't a private or individual event for a few white people in the Northern Hemisphere. And that's good news.
So looking at the broader sphere of this, both as a historical perspective and from teachers in the church, who is your favorite mystic?
Wow. You know, on different levels of understanding, I'm asked that rather often, and I think I come up with different answers. Therese of Lisieux is hard to beat just because of her utter simplicity. Julian of Norwich took a long time to discover, but I can go back to her again and again and say, how did this 14th century woman get it? Or 13th century going into the 14th. Yeah, when the women mystics get it, they really get it. And I've been rereading Catherine of Siena, who said a lot of good things I never knew about. So you probably thought I'd say St. Francis, but that's too easy. He's too obvious. I think we need to be told to look in some different directions. And I hope those are a few.
Absolutely. Let's see here.
Sorry you got stuck with this.
It's a large topic to tackle. So I want to talk a bit about you reference examples from modern science that are teaching us things about the cosmic Christ. Really, you give examples like cells overturning within the human body, but also things like different natural sciences, things like water having different properties but still being the same thing. Can you talk a bit more about the tie-in with nature and with science and what that's teaching us about resurrection as a concept?
Yeah, what we're learning in geology and biology and almost all of the major sciences is that nothing is the same forever. And we sort of thought it was, because our time frame is so tiny. We just look, at our little period, and it looks like that mountain is in the same place. And we think the cells of our body are still the same. Apparently they're not. Now we're speaking of another major extinction being likely, which scares us all to death. And I look at all the dear animals and say, oh my gosh, do you have to suffer this along with us, along with all of us together? When the mystics speak of God alone being the one center or the one absolute and everything else in transition, I think they were correct. And that's not just a pious phrase, it seems to be true. I see Michael. Is he joining us? No. Oh, I wonder what it is. I know this is killing him.
He's trying to join us, but he's having some issues with his audio. I'm just going to see if we can get him on the phone. Let's see. Here he comes again. One moment.
I can see his lips moving. Oh, Michael, it's okay. I know the frustration. Technophobe. I don't know how I got on.
What, did you hear me?
Yes.
You hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But it's on the phone, I think.
Mike? Okay. No. Okay, he's not able to. We're not able to get him on, I don't think, unfortunately. Okay, well, we'll keep talking and we'll see if he jumps in, then we'll give him a chance to jump in. All right, so I know we've got a lot of people. We have nearly 600 people joining us here. Someone asked, a listener, Richard asked, is suffering our way through to knowability and higher consciousness?
Is suffering our
way through to knowability and higher consciousness?
Well, really love is, but when you love anything completely, you will always suffer. And so in that sense, whoever asked the question is absolutely right. And that isn't a morbid statement, but suffering is the only thing that humbles our control needs, our need to think we can fix everything. Suffering, for me, it's a simplistic definition, but suffering is whenever you're not in control, you're suffering. And so we have to take advantage of those moments where we're not in control to little by little hand over control to someone else. Now, that someone you and I probably call God. But I've met a lot of people who are not God believers who've still suffered a lot and learned to trust reality or the facts or what's in front of them. You know, suffering has taught them. I've seen it in 12-year-old kids in cancer hospitals who already accept that, okay, I'm going to have another set of painful shots today. This is the way it is. Suffering is the necessary humiliation of being human. So in that sense, it prepares us for the divine. When we stop fighting our humanity in its present form and let it teach us. And believe me, I can teach that much better than I can live it myself. Now I don't hear you, Brittany.
Sorry about that. We have another viewer who's asking, how do you experience Holy Week? What practices do you engage in during this week?
I've always loved Holy Week. Maybe anybody raised Catholic has. And I was, of course, raised in the old church, the 60s of the changing church, where the liturgies were marvelous, really well done inside the Franciscan community, at least. So I must admit that, first of all, I hanker back. Now I live here in a Mexican American parish in New Mexico, where we don't have all the frills and competencies that we had in the seminary. But certainly our celebration aligns with springtime. I've been working in my yard most of this week, and my grass is turning green again, and the daffodils are up. So I just try to take more time to observe and to gaze. What I mean by gazing, which is really the meaning of the word contemplation. It's long looks until you can appreciate what is and what's happening. And I've been doing a lot of gazing already this week, and we only start the Great Triduum tomorrow. So nothing, I'm not high church. There's no place for this. My little hermitage where I try to practice prayer of quiet. So and now the bishop here doesn't allow us old guys to have liturgy. I haven't had mass for a year.
Do you participate in a virtual version of mass?
No, I just, we used to speak of mass as going to communion. A lot of people still do. Well, if you can find a way, and I try to 10 times a day, to be in communion. I have 4 big cottonwood trees here behind my house, and my little dog is sitting here. He walks with me. As long as I'm in communion, I hope I'm not a heretic, but I don't feel an immense need to ritualize communion. When the point of ritualizing it is to be in communion. You follow me? And I love the ritual, but I did it for 52 years. My goodness, Jesus did it once and got the point, I think. So I think we over ritualize, and if that makes me wrong, I accept being wrong. But sometimes the ritual has become the substitute for the reality, in my opinion. So no, I can't say I've missed Mass. The good Mexican Americans here, they think I've died, I think. When I see them in the parking lot, they say, well, where are you? But they don't need me.
So we have some questions here about the recent insights of science and how they relate to what you term the material resurrection, and also questions about what you mean when you speak about the resurrected body. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, well, what really gave me the courage to think this way was 1 Corinthians 15, which is entirely on what we used to call the glorified body, the resurrected body. And Paul just has a whole chapter of one-liners that, if you're a systematic thinker, it's hard to put them together. But he seems to be saying what the Gospels is saying, that our embodiment after we die from this body is still embodiment. Now, I can't help but think it's what, some of the Eastern religions speak of. What's their term? The light body. Oh, I'm in early stage dementia, Brittany. I really am. What is it? It slipped my mind now. But the fact that the gospel stories have Jesus walking through doors, eating, they're clearly trying to say, we see him, he eats food, so he's a body, but he's a different kind of body. He's in 2 places at the same time. He is immediately recognizable by Mary Magdalene, who thinks he's the gardener. Each one of these has a wonderful theological point, by the way, but you have to put them all together. And of course, I had 50 some years to do that and preach on them. So little by little, the pieces of the puzzle make more and more sense. So I don't think resurrection is the abandoning of the physical world. It's entering into a new kind of physicality that is shareable, that is connected. This autonomy that you and I experience in our independent bodies. Like I am sitting here and you're sitting there. That, it seems, is what falls away. Uh, Again, it's about being in communion, and a communion that's given by grace. But I'm really very conservative, and I know most people don't think I am, but in my understanding of resurrection, I think we've got to insist on the material, but it's a new definition of material, the material resurrection of Jesus. It's not just the resurrection of an idea. And why do I say that? Because if incarnation is real, and that's our big trump card, that God entered into the flesh, then we have to let it carry us through the whole ride, all the way to resurrection. If incarnation is true, for me, resurrection is a natural and wonderful conclusion, because God doesn't die. And if God is hiding, as the word you used, inside of, and revealing inside of the physical universe, well, the physical universe is just fine, even in its hurricanes and forest fires and floods. It's all the pattern. But this is always going to be an act of faith for any of us to believe this. When you see anything dying, like I'm looking at a stand of trees out my front window. Now they're just starting to bud, but a few of them are dead and won't bud. This is the anniversary of burying my last dog right here in my front yard. I can see her tomb. So the pattern by my age becomes rather obvious, that nothing lasts forever. And yet, I'm going to speak out of the other side of my mouth, everything lasts forever. And I believe that's the Christian message, and why we shouldn't be creating morbid people. We've created quite a few, though, it seems. Now, not Mike Leach or not you, Brittany, but there's a number of sour people around. I don't know how they missed the message. Well, it's because no one ever told them. That's all. No one ever really rightly told them how good it is. I think Mary Oliver put it, how good it is that all things live forever. One of her poems.
No luck, Mike.
Oh.
Oh, gosh.
Sorry.
Oh,
Mike.
we love you too.
There's a reason for this. I think I'm going to play Pope Francis. He seems to really believe in a literal devil. So let's blame this on the devil. All right. The devil doesn't want us to get our message out. You have anything else, Brittany?
I do. So I have a question from a viewer, which I think dovetails with the question that Mike wanted to ask you. And I'll start with Mike's version. So he says, you're speaking about matter as being inhabited by God. And we remember the Jesuit poet, Gerard Hopkins, who says, there lies the dearest freshness down deep. The world is charged.
Yeah.
And Mike asked, what does all this mean? Not just at Easter time, but in the words of Nelson Algren, for keeps in a single day. And this is a similar question coming from a reader who says, hasn't God been incarnate throughout all of history? And is what we experienced in the Old Testament and in Jesus's lifetime and our lifetimes creation coming into itself?
Well put.
Kudos to Judy Carpenter.
The early Franciscans intuited that the first incarnation was the Big Bang. It was nature, was creation. And the second Bible only happened, 3,000, began to happen 3,000 years ago. It's a much more recent version, which leaves 99.9% of geological time out of the grasp of God. I mean, I love the Bible. I use the Bible a great deal. But when you become over reliant upon words instead of what's right in front of you physically, I've just seen it produce very contentious religion and contentious religions. The three religions of the book have spent much of the last 1,000 years fighting one another and themselves, because words never get you to where we want to go. And that's why, as John's gospel says, the word became flesh. So it's the flesh that liberates us. Now, that was understood and taught much more in the Eastern Church than the Western Church. And there's the nub of the problem. That after the Eastern and Western churches separated in 1054 by a mutual excommunication, God bless them, most people stopped studying. They didn't even know the names of the Eastern fathers. And they were mostly fathers at that point. Of course, most didn't even know the Western fathers, too. So what I'm saying is we lost contact with early Christianity, the Desert Fathers and Mothers, the early mystics. There was much more belief in corporate salvation. And that was such a serious point that it was the only addition to the Apostles' Creed. I think it was 5th century. I believe in the communion of saints. Now, you said that. We take it for granted. But that came later as we recognize this is all a corporate reality. Now, I think if they would have been rather complete, they would have said, I believe in the communion of sinners, too, that we're one in our goodness and we're one in our badness. We rub off on one another in both ways. And the individualization of the gospel probably did more to undo its effectiveness than anything else. If Jesus just came to save individual souls, I don't think he's doing a very good job. Now, if, and I don't mean to be cynical by that, but I've attended too many deaths and deathbeds, even of bishops, and most of us still seem to be pretty cranky. But the corporate mystery, that history is evolving, that consciousness is evolving, that we as a whole, believe it or not, despite George Floyd incidents, we are growing up. And the evidence for that is everywhere. So I'm a deep, and if you need a scriptural verification for that, I encourage you to go back to the scriptures, starting with the Hebrew scriptures, what we call the Old Testament, and notice how the prophets, continuing into Jesus, hardly ever speak of an individual. They speak of Israel, Judea, Moab, Capharnaum, Bethsaida. It's always the corporate that is being judged. And it's the corporate that pulls us down. It's the corporate that pulls us up. Now, the reason we need to make a great deal of that is it calls forth a very different set of virtues. Instead of being privately humble, it's like maybe it means being corporately strong. and speaking the truth. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
It's different. We consider that arrogance and pride to speak truth to power. The prophets didn't, because they had public virtue. I was raised, even by the good Franciscans, starting in my pre-Vatican II novitiate, with an almost complete emphasis upon private virtue. You understand? How can you think well of yourself as being humble and kind and not making noise in the hallway? It's like, oh, come on. This is never going to save the world. It's too self-preoccupied. And I think we're all meeting so many people who, for me, are in the body of Christ, but don't use the Christian vocabulary so much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But do they take responsibility for the future of history? And the people who are writing all these books, people like Malcolm Gladwell, or Thomas Friedman, it's like, wow, how can you care that much? My mind can't even hold together that much caring. And yet, often, I'm sorry to say, they're not nominal Christians, but they're real carers. The flow, what I call the Trinitarian flow, is flowing through them. And it doesn't need to be proven, it's obvious.
Yeah.
It's obvious, if you're looking for it.
Yeah. Well, we were already somehow reaching the end of our time together today, but I just want to thank you for sharing just a small slice of your wisdom and your presence with the many people gathered today. We've put the link to your column for NCR in the chat for folks. I want to encourage people to go to ncronline.org to read that column. I will end this conversation with the last line of Father Richard Rohr's column today. He says, Easter is not one day, but Easter is apparently every day and everywhere. We wish you all well. We thank you for joining us. Before we go, I need to thank our sponsor also. Thanks to Franciscan Media for joining us today. We appreciate their support. The Franciscan Media, their mission is to share the love of God and the spirit of St. Francis through their website, books, and audios, and they encourage viewers to visit their website for great books and audio from Richard Rohr. So thank you to them for sponsorship. And we'll say our farewells here. Mike wants to join us real quick with another written message. Oh, that's kind of you. Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you, Richard. You're welcome.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mike. We felt your energy with us today. And thank you all for joining us.
It was a delight. Happy holidays. The great days are ahead of us. God bless you both and all of you 600.